The smoke curling from my chimney looked beautiful against the gray December sky in Boulder, Colorado. And I was sitting by the fire with my coffee when someone started hammering on my front door like they were trying to break it down. I set down my mug and walked to the entrance, opening it to find a woman in her mid-40s with an angular blonde bob and a designer tracksuit that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Her face was red, and she was clutching her phone like a weapon. "Are you the homeowner?" she demanded before I could even say hello. "Yes, I'm Stephen Anderson. Can I help you?" "I'm Patricia Henderson, the president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, and I need you to put out that fire immediately. You're violating multiple community guidelines and creating a public safety hazard." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what? My fireplace? Your chimney is belching smoke all over the neighborhood. It's an eyesore, it's polluting the air, and it's probably illegal. I've already called the police and the fire department." I felt a smile tugging at my lips, but I kept my expression neutral. "Madam, I think there might be some confusion. I have every right to use my fireplace. According to Section 7 of the HOA bylaws, no homeowner may create excessive smoke, odors, or other nuisances that disturb the peaceful enjoyment of neighboring properties." I've been getting calls all morning from concerned residents. "From who exactly?" I asked, glancing around the cul-de-sac. My nearest neighbor was at least 100 feet away, and the smoke was going straight up into the sky, dissipating quickly in the winter air. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "That's confidential HOA business. The point is, you need to extinguish that fire right now, or you'll be facing daily fines of $500 until you come into compliance." $500. For using my fireplace. For creating a nuisance, she corrected sharply. "And if you refuse to cooperate, we'll take legal action. I have a list of attorneys who specialize in HOA enforcement." Before I could respond, a Boulder Police Department cruiser pulled up to the curb, followed by one of the city's fire trucks. My colleague Jake Morrison jumped out of the passenger side, and I had to suppress a laugh. This was about to get interesting. "Someone called about a fire hazard," Jake called out, looking at the house and then spotting me in the doorway. His expression shifted to confusion and then amusement. "Hey, Stephen, what's going on?" Patricia immediately rushed toward him. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man is refusing to put out an illegal fire that's creating smoke throughout our entire neighborhood. As HOA president, I'm formally requesting that you enforce the fire code." Jake looked at me, then at Patricia, then at the thin stream of smoke coming from my chimney. The police officer, a young guy named Torres who I'd met during a few inter-department trainings, was trying very hard not to smile. "Madam," Jake said slowly, "that's just a regular chimney with regular smoke from what appears to be a properly functioning fireplace. It's excessive, it's dangerous, it needs to be stopped." I decided it was time to step in. "Patricia, I think I should mention something. I'm the fire marshal for Boulder. I personally inspected and approved that chimney and fireplace system when I moved in 6 months ago." The silence that followed was golden. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Jake turned away to hide his grin. Officer Torres suddenly became very interested in his notebook. "You're what?" Patricia finally managed. "Fire Marshal, Stephen Anderson. I'm in charge of fire prevention, investigation, and code enforcement for the entire city. That chimney meets every single safety regulation, and I have the paperwork to prove it." Patricia's face went from red to purple. "That doesn't matter. The HOA has its own rules that supersede city regulations." "Actually, that's not how it works," I said, keeping my tone professional. "City and county fire codes always take precedence over HOA bylaws." You can't forbid something that's explicitly allowed and regulated by municipal law. We'll see about that, Patricia snapped, turning to Jake. I want this documented. I want a formal investigation into whether this fireplace is actually up to code. Jake sighed and pulled out his radio. Dispatch, we're going to need Fire Inspector Chen to come out to 425 Meadowbrook Drive for a courtesy inspection. Nothing urgent. Copy that. Engine 6. Inspector Chen will be there in 20. Patricia looked triumphant, like she'd won some kind of victory. I just went back inside to refill my coffee, leaving the door open so they could see the fireplace from the entryway. It was a beautiful stone hearth with a custom-built chimney system that I'd spent weeks researching and approving the plans for. Every brick, every joint, every measurement was perfect because I'd made sure of it myself. Inspector Maria Chen arrived 15 minutes later, stepping out of her department SUV with her inspection kit. She was one of my best inspectors, thorough and by the book. She took one look at me standing in the doorway and raised an eyebrow. "Boss, what's this about?" HOA complaint. "Would you mind doing a full inspection for the record?" Maria grinned. "Oh, this should be fun. Yeah, I'll document everything." Patricia hovered behind Maria like an anxious ghost as the inspector went through every aspect of the fireplace system. She checked the firebox, examined the damper, inspected the chimney cap, measured the clearances, tested the smoke chamber, and reviewed all the original permits and approval documents that I provided. After 45 minutes, Maria stepped back and started writing up her report. Patricia practically pounced on her. "Well, is it legal or not, madam? This is one of the finest residential fireplace installations I've ever seen. The clearances exceed code requirements by 3 inches on all sides. The chimney liner is premium stainless steel. The cap has integrated spark arresters that go beyond what's required. There's even a carbon monoxide detection system tied into the home's alarm system. This isn't just up to code. It's a textbook example of how to do it right. But the smoke is completely normal for a wood-burning fireplace operating within environmental guidelines. Boulder allows wood burning on all but red alert air quality days, and today's a green day. There's no violation here whatsoever." Patricia snatched the report from Maria's hands, scanning it desperately for anything she could use. Finding nothing, she whirled on me. "This isn't over. The HOA board will be reviewing this matter at our next meeting, and we'll be consulting with our attorneys about amending the bylaws to specifically prohibit wood-burning fireplaces." "You can try," I said calmly. "But you should know that retroactive prohibitions on existing legally installed fixtures are generally unenforceable, especially when they conflict with municipal code. We'll see what our lawyer says about that." After everyone left, I sat back down by my fire and tried to enjoy the rest of my Saturday morning. I'd moved to Meadowbrook Estates because it was close to work and had beautiful mountain views. The HOA had seemed reasonable during the buying process. Just basic stuff about lawn maintenance and exterior paint colors. I'd read through the bylaws carefully and hadn't seen anything that would interfere with my lifestyle. Apparently, I'd underestimated Patricia Henderson's determination to control every aspect of her neighbors' lives. The following Tuesday, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. It was from the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, informing me that I was being fined $500 per day, starting from the date of Patricia's visit, for violating community standards regarding smoke and air quality. The letter included a demand for immediate payment of $1,500 for the 3 days that had elapsed, plus a notice that I was required to appear before the HOA board at their next meeting. I called my lawyer, Tom Richards, who I'd worked with on a few property matters over the years. "Tom, I need some advice on HOA law." "Oh boy. What happened?" I explained the situation, and he listened quietly until I finished. "Okay, so they're trying to fine you for using a legally permitted, properly functioning fireplace." "Exactly." "And you're the actual fire marshal who approved it?" "Yep." Tom started laughing. "Stephen, this is beautiful. Don't pay a cent. They have absolutely no legal standing. In fact, if they keep pushing this, you might have grounds for a harassment claim. Do you want me to send them a letter?" "Not yet. Let me go to this board meeting and see what they say. Maybe cooler heads will prevail." "I doubt it, but okay. Call me if you need me." The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 in the community clubhouse. I showed up at 6:45 with a folder containing copies of all my permits, inspection reports, and the relevant sections of Boulder's municipal code. About 20 other homeowners were scattered around the room, some looking curious, others looking annoyed at having to be there. Patricia sat at the head table with 4 other board members. I recognized 2 of them as neighbors from other streets in the development. She banged a gavel at exactly 7 o'clock. The December meeting of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board is now in session. First order of business is a violation hearing for Stephen Anderson of 425 Meadowbrook Drive regarding unauthorized smoke emissions. "Point of order," I said, standing up. "I'd like to clarify that my fireplace isn't unauthorized. It's fully permitted and inspected by the city." Patricia glared at me. "Mr. Anderson, you'll have your chance to speak when called upon. Please sit down." I sat, but made a note of her hostile tone. One of the other board members, a middle-aged man named Douglas, looked uncomfortable. Patricia launched into a presentation about neighborhood standards and air quality. She had printed out pictures of my chimney smoke taken from various angles, making it look far more dramatic than it actually was. She'd also apparently sent a questionnaire to every house in the development asking if they'd noticed increased smoke in the neighborhood. Out of 82 homes, 7 people had responded saying yes. "As you can see," Patricia concluded, "this is affecting the entire community." Mr. Anderson's refusal to comply with reasonable requests shows a blatant disregard for his neighbors and our community standards. I'm recommending that the board impose maximum fines until he ceases this activity and removes the wood-burning capability from his fireplace. "That seems extreme," Douglas said quietly. "It's just a normal fireplace, isn't it? It's creating a nuisance," Patricia snapped. "Mr. Anderson, you may now present your defense." I stood up and walked to the front, laying out my documents on the table. "Thank you. First, I'd like to introduce myself properly. I'm Stephen Anderson, and I've been the fire marshal for the city of Boulder for 8 years. The fireplace in my home was personally designed, permitted, and inspected by me according to the highest safety and environmental standards." Several people in the audience sat up straighter. Patricia's jaw tightened. I continued. "Here are the permits from the city building department. Here's the inspection certificate from our Fire Prevention Bureau. Here's the manufacturer's specifications for the fireplace insert and chimney system. And here's a letter from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment confirming that residential wood burning is allowed in Boulder County on all but red alert air quality days." I handed copies to each board member. Douglas started reading immediately. Patricia shoved hers aside. "The HOA has the authority to impose stricter standards than city regulations," she said. "Actually, that's not entirely accurate," I replied. "HOA rules can't violate state or local laws, and Colorado Revised Statutes Section 3833.3106 specifically limits HOA authority over items related to public safety and utility services. Heating systems fall under that category. Additionally, any restriction on legally permitted improvements made before the restriction was adopted would be an impermissible retroactive application. Another board member, a woman named Ellen, raised her hand. "Patricia, did we consult with our lawyer before issuing these fines?" "That's not necessary for clear violations of our bylaws." "But is it a clear violation?" Douglas asked. "Section 7 says excessive smoke, but it doesn't define what that means. If the city says his fireplace is operating normally, how can we say it's excessive?" Patricia's face was getting that familiar purple tinge. "It's disrupting the peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood." "Is it, though?" This came from a man in the audience who I recognized as my next-door neighbor, Carl. "I live right next to Stephen, and I haven't noticed anything unusual. It just smells like a normal wood fire sometimes in the evening. It's actually kind of nice." "I second that," said another voice. It was Margaret from across the street. "My husband and I have a fireplace too. We've been afraid to use it because Patricia told us last year that fireplaces were against HOA policy. But if Stevens is legal, maybe ours is too." Patricia stood up abruptly. "This hearing is about Mr. Anderson's violation, not general fireplace policy. I move that we uphold the fines and require immediate cessation of wood-burning activities." "I move we dismiss the fines entirely," Douglas countered. "We have no basis to override city regulations, and I don't want to expose the HOA to a lawsuit we'll definitely lose." "Second," Ellen said immediately. Patricia's knuckles were white on her gavel. "All in favor of dismissing the fines." 3 hands went up. Douglas, Ellen, and a quiet board member named Frank opposed. Patricia's hand shot up, followed reluctantly by the 5th board member, a woman named Susan. "Motion passes," Douglas said. "The fines are dismissed." I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next week, Patricia launched what can only be described as a campaign of harassment. She sent daily emails to all homeowners about the dangers of wood smoke. She posted signs at the neighborhood entrance warning about poor air quality. She even called the EPA to try to get them to investigate my fireplace, but they told her residential fireplaces were outside their jurisdiction unless there was evidence of environmental dumping. Then things escalated. On the following Saturday, I woke up to find that someone had dumped a pile of ashes and charred wood on my driveway during the night. There was a note stuck to my mailbox that read, "This is what you're putting in our lungs." I took photos and filed a police report. Officer Torres came out to document everything. "Any idea who did this?" he asked. "I have a pretty good guess, but no proof." "Your HOA president?" "Bingo." Torres shook his head. "She's been calling the station every day asking us to cite you for something." Sarge finally had to tell her to stop wasting police resources. "Be careful, man. She seems obsessed." 2 days later, I came home from work to find Patricia standing in my driveway with a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Anderson," Patricia said coldly. "This is Harold Mitchell, the HOA's attorney. We need to discuss your continued violations." Harold looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Anderson, I've advised Mrs. Henderson that the HOA likely doesn't have standing to restrict your fireplace use, but she's insisted on pursuing this matter. I'm required to notify you that the board is considering a special assessment of $10,000 for all homeowners to cover the legal costs of fighting your fire code violations." "What fire code violations?" I asked. "There aren't any. The city has confirmed that multiple times." "The HOA defines its own standards," Patricia interjected. "Actually, Mrs. Henderson," Harold said carefully, That's not quite accurate. The HOA can't create standards that conflict with municipal law, and as I've explained, heating systems are protected under state statute. Then we'll change the state statute. I have connections at the legislature. Harold closed his briefcase. Mrs. Henderson, I can't continue to represent the HOA on this matter. It's frivolous, and I could face sanctions for pursuing it. I'm formally withdrawing as counsel effective immediately. The board will receive my final bill within 30 days. He nodded apologetically to me and walked back to his car. Patricia watched him go with her mouth hanging open. You can't just leave, she called after him. Actually, I can. Good luck, Mrs. Henderson. After Harold drove away, Patricia turned her fury on me. This is your fault. You've cost this HOA thousands in legal fees. I've done nothing except use my legally permitted fireplace. You're the one who decided to make this a crusade. You think you're so smart because you're fire marshal. You think you're above the rules. But this is my neighborhood, and I've worked hard to maintain its standards. People like you, who don't respect authority, who think they can do whatever they want, you're ruining everything. There was something almost unhinged in her eyes. I realized this had stopped being about the fireplace a long time ago. This was about control and power, and I'd threatened that by not immediately bowing to her demands. Patricia, I respect rules when they're reasonable and legal. Your restriction isn't either of those things. I'm sorry that bothers you, but I'm not going to stop using my fireplace. We'll see about that. She stormed off to her car, and I went inside feeling uneasy. This situation was spiraling into something darker than a simple HOA dispute. That night, around 11 o'clock, my fire alarm went off. I bolted awake and ran downstairs, but there was no smoke, no fire. The alarm was shrieking from the kitchen, but everything looked normal. I checked every room, the basement, even outside, and found nothing wrong. I reset the alarm and went back to bed, but 2 hours later it went off again. And again at 4 in the morning. Each time there was no actual emergency. I finally disconnected it just to get some sleep. The next morning, I had a fire safety technician come out to inspect the system. He found that someone had tampered with the exterior control box, triggering false alarms. The lock was picked, he said, showing me the scratches around the keyhole. Someone knew what they were doing. You should definitely file a police report. This is serious. Disabling fire safety equipment is a crime. I called the police again, and this time they sent out a detective. Detective Sarah Wu listened to my story with increasing concern. So you have an ongoing dispute with your HOA president. Someone dumped ashes on your property, and now someone sabotaged your fire alarm. That's the situation. You have any security cameras? Not yet, but I'm getting some installed today. Good idea. I'll talk to Mrs. Henderson, but without direct evidence, there's not much I can do right now. Keep documenting everything. I spent that afternoon installing a comprehensive camera system covering my entire property. Front door, back door, driveway, garage, all angles. If Patricia or anyone else tried something else, I'd have proof. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, my new cameras caught Patricia Henderson sneaking into my backyard, carrying a red plastic gas can. The footage showed her pouring something around my woodpile and the base of my back deck. Then she pulled out a lighter. I was already awake because the camera system sent an alert to my phone the moment it detected motion. I called 911 while running downstairs. This is Fire Marshal Stephen Anderson at 425 Meadowbrook Drive. I have an intruder attempting to commit arson on my property. I need police and fire response immediately. I grabbed my own fire extinguisher and ran outside. Patricia was trying to light the accelerant she'd poured, but it wasn't catching properly. She looked up and saw me, and the expression on her face was pure rage mixed with something like madness. "You wouldn't listen," she screamed. "You wouldn't stop. You think you're better than everyone. Patricia, put down the lighter. You're committing a felony. I'm protecting my neighborhood. You're the criminal." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Patricia stood there, frozen, lighter still in her hand. The accelerant had finally started to catch, small flames licking along the trail she'd poured. I emptied my fire extinguisher on the flames, knocking them down instantly. Seconds later, police cars screeched into my driveway, and officers poured into the backyard with weapons drawn. "Drop the lighter. Hands up." Patricia finally seemed to understand the gravity of what she'd done. The lighter clattered to the ground, and she raised her shaking hands. Officer Torres handcuffed her while reading her rights. "Patricia Henderson, you're under arson, criminal trespass, and attempted destruction of property. You have the right to remain silent." Detective Wu arrived shortly after and reviewed the camera footage on my phone. "That's crystal clear. She's done." "Mr. Anderson, you're incredibly lucky you had these cameras installed." "I'm lucky I was awake." The fire truck arrived and Jake jumped out, taking in the scene with wide eyes. "Stephen, what the hell happened?" I explained while the fire crew made sure there were no hot spots and documented the accelerant trail. The gas can Patricia had used was still sitting on my lawn. Jake photographed everything and collected samples. "This is attempted arson of an occupied structure," he said grimly. "That's a Class 3 felony in Colorado. She's looking at serious prison time." By morning, the story had spread through the entire neighborhood. People kept stopping by to check on me and express their disbelief. Margaret from across the street brought me coffee and cookies. I knew Patricia was controlling, but I never thought she'd do something like this. She could have killed you. She could have burned down half the neighborhood. "I think she stopped seeing reality clearly somewhere along the way," I said. "It became about winning instead of what actually made sense." Carl, my next-door neighbor, was furious. "I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. We need to remove her from the board immediately and figure out what the hell else she's been doing." The emergency meeting happened 3 days later, and nearly every homeowner showed up. Douglas took over as acting president and started by addressing Patricia's arrest. "As many of you know, Patricia Henderson is currently in custody facing multiple felony charges related to the attempted arson of Stephen Anderson's home. The board has voted unanimously to remove her from all HOA positions effective immediately. We're also launching an audit of HOA finances and activities to ensure there are no other irregularities." "I'd like to say something," I said, standing up. "I know this has been a crazy situation, but I don't want it to define this neighborhood. I moved here because it seemed like a great community, and I still think it can be. What happened with Patricia was an extreme outlier. Let's not let it poison everything." There was applause, and several people came up afterward to thank me for not painting everyone with the same brush. Ellen from the board approached me with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Stephen. I should have pushed back harder against Patricia months ago. There were signs that she was becoming obsessive about control, but I thought it was just her personality. I never imagined she'd go this far." "You couldn't have known. Nobody could." The audit that Douglas ordered revealed some disturbing patterns. Patricia had been using HOA funds to pay for private investigations of homeowners she suspected of violations. She'd hired a PI to follow people and photograph their properties. She'd also been sending threatening letters to multiple residents over minor issues, often making up violations that didn't exist in the bylaws. One homeowner, an elderly man named Robert, revealed that Patricia had threatened to have him evicted if he didn't remove a bird feeder from his front yard. She'd claimed it was attracting pests and lowering property values. Robert had been so intimidated that he'd not only removed the feeder, but stopped sitting on his own front porch because he was afraid Patricia would find something else to complain about. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that Patricia's obsession with my fireplace had been just the latest in a long pattern of authoritarian behavior. The difference was that I'd had the knowledge and resources to push back, which had triggered her complete breakdown. Patricia's trial was scheduled for March. The district attorney charged her with attempted first-degree arson, criminal trespass, harassment, and vandalism. Her defense attorney tried to argue temporary insanity brought on by stress from her HOA duties, but the prosecution presented evidence that her behavior had been escalating for years, showing premeditation and intent. I testified about the entire sequence of events, from her first appearance at my door to the night she tried to burn down my house. The jury watched the security camera footage of her pouring accelerant and attempting to light it. There wasn't much room for doubt. They found her guilty on all counts after just 3 hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in prison, noting that attempting to burn down an occupied home showed a callous disregard for human life, and that her position of authority in the HOA made her breach of trust even more egregious. Patricia's husband filed for divorce while she was awaiting sentencing. Their adult daughter released a statement saying she hadn't spoken to her mother in 5 years because of her controlling behavior, and that she hoped her mother would get the mental health treatment she clearly needed. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA underwent massive reforms. Douglas was elected as the new president, and they rewrote the bylaws with input from all homeowners. The new rules were simpler, more reasonable, and included clear checks on board authority. They also established a requirement that any proposed fine or restriction had to be reviewed by an attorney before implementation to ensure it didn't conflict with local, state, or federal law. Several homeowners who'd been too afraid to use their fireplaces during Patricia's reign finally started enjoying them. Margaret and her husband invited me over for drinks by their fireplace, laughing about how they'd been intimidated out of using something they'd paid to have installed. "To being able to enjoy our own homes," Margaret toasted, "and to Stephen for having the spine to stand up to a bully." Jake stopped by a few weeks after the trial to check on me. We sat by my fireplace, which had become something of a symbolic fixture in the neighborhood. "You know what's funny?" Jake said. "That whole disaster started because Patricia couldn't stand someone not immediately obeying her. If she just let it go after that first day, she'd still be HOA president, her husband would still be married to her, and she wouldn't be in prison." "Pride and control can destroy people," I said. She couldn't tolerate the idea that she might be wrong or that someone else might have authority she didn't. The irony is that she tried to burn down the fire marshal's house. I mean, of all the people to commit arson against. I had to laugh at that. Yeah, the universe has a sense of humor. Life gradually returned to normal. I continued my work as fire marshal, and the publicity from the case actually led to some positive outcomes. The city council allocated more funding for fire safety education, and we launched a program to help homeowners understand proper fireplace and chimney maintenance. I also started a series of community workshops about fire safety, and dozens of people from Meadowbrook and neighboring developments attended. It felt good to turn such a negative situation into something educational and helpful. The HOA became genuinely pleasant under Douglas's leadership. They organized neighborhood barbecues and movie nights at the clubhouse. They created a community garden and a book exchange. The atmosphere shifted from fear and restriction to actual community building. Carl and I became good friends. We started a tradition of alternating houses for Sunday football watching, always with a fire going in whoever's fireplace we were using. It was a small act of defiance against the memory of Patricia's tyranny, but mostly it was just nice. One evening in late April, I was sitting on my back deck watching the sunset over the Rockies. The scorch marks from Patricia's accelerant had long since been cleaned and sealed. My woodpile was restocked for next winter. The cameras were still running, but I no longer checked them anxiously multiple times a day. My phone rang. It was Detective Wu. "Hey, Stephen, I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia Henderson's attorney filed an appeal, but it was denied this morning. Her sentence is final. She'll be in prison for at least 6 years before she's eligible for parole. Thanks for letting me know, Detective. How are you doing? That was a hell of an ordeal." "I'm good. Really good, actually. The neighborhood has become what I hoped it would be when I moved in. Sometimes it takes a crisis to bring out the best in people. That's a healthy way to look at it. Take care of yourself, Stephen." After we hung up, I went back inside and started a fire, even though it was warmer than strictly necessary for heat. The wood crackled and popped, and smoke drifted up through the chimney that had caused so much trouble. But it wasn't trouble, really. It was just smoke from a fire, something humans had been gathering around for thousands of years. The real trouble had been one person's inability to accept that they didn't control everything and everyone around them. Patricia had seen my refusal to comply with her unreasonable demand as a personal attack, rather than a simple matter of me exercising my legal rights. She'd escalated and escalated until she destroyed her own life, all over something as innocent as chimney smoke. I thought about Robert, the elderly man who'd been too scared to sit on his own porch. I thought about Margaret and the other homeowners who'd been afraid to use amenities in their own homes. I thought about how many small tyrannies exist in neighborhoods across America, enforced by people who mistake rule enforcement for leadership and control for authority. The fire popped loudly, sending up a shower of sparks that were safely contained by the chimney system I designed to exceed every safety standard. Outside, the sun finally dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Smoke from my chimney rose into the evening air, visible for maybe 100 feet before it dissipated completely, bothering no one. My phone buzzed with a text from Douglas. "Board meeting next week to discuss summer concert series in the park. Want to help plan?" Thinking we could do a barbecue competition, I smiled and texted back, "Count me in." This was what a neighborhood should be. People working together, respecting each other's rights, and building something positive. It had taken Patricia's arrest to clear the air, literally and figuratively, but now Meadowbrook Estates felt like home. The following week, I ran into Ellen at the grocery store. She was loading vegetables into her cart and looked up with a smile when she saw me. "Stephen, I wanted to tell you the audit finally finished. Did you hear?" "No. What did they find?" Patricia had been embezzling HOA funds. Not huge amounts, but over the past 5 years, she'd redirected almost $30,000 into a personal account. She used it to pay for all those private investigators and attorney fees without board approval. The insurance company is covering the loss, but it's being added to the criminal charges. Her sentence might get extended. I shook my head. Every time I think that situation can't get worse, there's another layer. The good news is that we're completely restructuring the financial oversight. Everything needs 2 signatures now, and we're hiring a professional management company to handle the accounts. Douglas is doing a great job, but none of us want that much power concentrated in one person again. That sounds like a smart plan. Hey, are you coming to the planning meeting Thursday? We're really hoping you'll help with the barbecue competition. We need a judge, and apparently you actually competed in barbecue before, I laughed. Yeah, back in Texas before I moved here. I'm not an expert, but I know my way around a smoker. Perfect. See you Thursday. The planning meeting was well attended and surprisingly fun. About 15 homeowners showed up with ideas for the summer concert series. Someone suggested local bands. Another person knew a guy who did classic rock covers, and Margaret volunteered to coordinate with food trucks. What about the barbecue competition? Carl asked. Are we doing teams or individual? I think teams would be more fun, I suggested. Maybe 4 people per team and they have to live in Meadowbrook. Keep it friendly and competitive. I love it, Douglas said. Let's do pulled pork as the main category. Everyone makes 1 rack of ribs and 1 pork shoulder, and we judge based on taste, tenderness, and presentation. The energy in the room was infectious. This was what Patricia had never understood. You build community by bringing people together, not by forcing them apart with endless rules and threats. Authority that's respected comes from serving others, not from dominating them. Over the next few months, Meadowbrook Estates transformed. The concert series was a huge hit, with families gathering on blankets in the common area to listen to music and watch the sunset. The barbecue competition in July attracted 8 teams and over 100 spectators. I judged alongside 2 other volunteers, and we had a legitimately hard time choosing a winner because everyone brought their best. Carl's team took first place with a bourbon maple glazed pork shoulder that was so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork. He was insufferably proud of his trophy, a golden pig statue mounted on a wooden base, and he displayed it prominently in his living room. You're going to defend that title next year, I told him after the awards ceremony. Damn right I am. This is going to be a Meadowbrook tradition. As summer turned to fall, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in less than a year. I'd moved to this neighborhood hoping for a quiet place to live close to work. Instead, I'd been drawn into a bizarre conflict that escalated all the way to attempted arson, resulted in my HOA president going to prison, and somehow ended with me becoming an integral part of a genuinely wonderful community. The first cold night in October, I built my first fire of the season. I posted a photo of it on the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, "First fire of the season. Stay warm, everyone." Within minutes, I had responses. Margaret posted a picture of her fireplace lit. Carl did the same. Robert, the elderly gentleman who'd been intimidated by Patricia, posted a photo of himself sitting in his front porch chair with a blanket, a cup of tea, and his bird feeder fully restocked and visible in the frame. His caption read, "Enjoying my porch and my birds. Life is good." I felt a swell of emotion seeing that. This is what we'd won by standing up to Patricia's tyranny. Not just my right to use my fireplace, but Robert's confidence to sit on his own porch. Margaret's freedom to enjoy her home's amenities. Everyone's ability to live without fear of arbitrary rules enforced by threats and intimidation. Winter arrived with Colorado's typical dramatic flair. We got 2 feet of snow in early November, and the entire neighborhood came together for an impromptu snow sculpture contest. Kids built snowmen while adults constructed increasingly elaborate structures. Someone made a snow dragon. Carl attempted a snow replica of his barbecue trophy. I used my fireplace almost every evening that winter, and the smoke that had once been the source of such conflict became just another comforting sight in a neighborhood full of warm homes and good people. Sometimes I'd see Patricia's old house, now occupied by a young couple with a baby, and I'd wonder if she ever thought about what she'd thrown away over something so trivial. In February, I got an unexpected letter. It was from Patricia, forwarded through the district attorney's office. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 3 pages of small, cramped handwriting. It started with justifications and excuses, blaming stress and the burden of HOA leadership for her actions. But by the second page, something shifted. She wrote about court-mandated therapy and how it had forced her to confront patterns of behavior she'd had her entire life. She wrote about her need to control everything and everyone, and how it had cost her marriage, her relationship with her daughter, and ultimately her freedom. The final page was an apology, not a conditional one, not one filled with buts and excuses. A real apology. She acknowledged that she tried to burn down my house because I dared to not submit to her authority. She acknowledged the harassment, the vandalism, the campaign to make my life miserable. She said she understood if I never forgave her, but that she wanted me to know she was genuinely sorry and was working to become a different person. I read the letter twice, then put it in a drawer. I didn't know if Patricia's transformation was genuine or just part of her prison rehabilitation program. Either way, it didn't change what she'd done or the consequences she was facing. But I appreciated the apology, even if I wasn't ready to offer forgiveness. Spring brought another round of HOA elections. Douglas had done such a good job that he ran unopposed for president. Ellen and the other board members who'd helped reform the organization were all re-elected. There was a sense that we'd finally found our footing as a community. At the annual HOA meeting in April, Douglas stood up to give his State of the Neighborhood address. Last year was challenging for all of us. We faced a crisis that exposed serious problems in how our HOA operated. But I'm proud of how this community responded. We didn't let fear and control define us. We came together, we made changes, and we built something better. He gestured around the packed clubhouse. Look at this turnout. A year ago, people came to meetings because they were afraid not to. Now you're here because you actually want to be involved. That's the difference between ruling through fear and leading through service. There was enthusiastic applause. Douglas continued, I want to specifically thank Stephen Anderson, who stood up for his rights when it would have been easier to just comply. His courage in the face of unreasonable demands ultimately led to reforms that benefit all of us. Stephen, would you stand up? Embarrassed, I stood while people clapped. Carl whistled loudly and someone shouted, Speech? I don't have a speech prepared, I said. I just want to say that I love this neighborhood. I love the community we've built together. What happened last year was unfortunate, but it taught us all something important about the kind of place we want to live. I'm grateful to be your neighbor. More applause, and then we moved on to the rest of the agenda. New playground equipment for the community park. A proposal to add solar panels to the clubhouse. Updates on landscaping and maintenance. Normal, boring, wonderful HOA business. After the meeting, a new resident approached me. She just moved in 3 months ago and introduced herself as Rachel. I heard about what happened last year, she said. With the previous HOA president and your fireplace. When I was looking at houses, someone told me this neighborhood had been through something difficult, but had come out stronger. That's actually why I chose to buy here. I wanted to live somewhere with people who'd proven they could handle adversity. That's an interesting perspective, I said. I moved from a neighborhood where the HOA was exactly like what I heard yours used to be. Petty, controlling, constantly threatening people. I spent 3 years fighting with them over the color I painted my front door. When I sold that house, I promised myself I'd find somewhere different. Somewhere like this. Well, welcome to Meadowbrook. I think you'll like it here. I already do. And for what it's worth, I have a fireplace too. Used it all winter. It's nice to know I don't have to worry about someone calling the cops over chimney smoke. That conversation stuck with me. Patricia's legacy, in a twisted way, had ended up being positive. Her spectacular fall had cleared the way for genuine reform and had actually made Meadowbrook Estates more desirable. People wanted to live in a community that had proven it could overcome tyranny and build something better. Summer arrived again, and with it, the second annual concert series and barbecue competition. Carl's team defended their title successfully with a coffee-rubbed brisket that was absolutely divine. The concerts attracted even bigger crowds than the previous year, and someone started a tradition of bringing homemade desserts to share. I found myself at one of these concerts in July, sitting on a blanket with Carl and his family, watching kids run around catching fireflies while a local folk band played. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting everything in gold light, and I felt completely content. You ever think about what would have happened if you just put out your fire that first day? Carl asked suddenly. Sometimes, I admitted. I mean, the easy thing would have been to comply. Patricia would have moved on to bullying someone else, and I could have just avoided using my fireplace. But then nothing would have changed, Carl's wife Michelle said. Patricia would still be president. Robert would still be afraid to sit on his porch. I'd still be terrified every time I wanted to plant something in my yard without asking permission first. I guess that's true. You did good, Stephen, Carl said. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for all of us, even the ones who didn't know they needed someone to stand up for them. I watched the band launch into a cover of an old John Denver song, Rocky Mountain High, which felt appropriate for the setting. Around me, my neighbors sang along, their voices mingling in the warm summer air. Children played, couples danced. Someone had brought their dog, and it was happily accepting pets from anyone who'd provide them. This was real community. Not the sanitized, controlled version Patricia had tried to impose, where everyone followed rules out of fear and nobody stepped out of line. This was messy and loud and full of life, with all the beautiful chaos that came from people actually enjoying each other's company without looking over their shoulders. As darkness fell and the concert wrapped up, people lingered to talk and laugh. The band packed up their equipment while kids played flashlight tag in the field. Nobody was in a hurry to leave. There was no tension, no fear, just contentment. Walking home that night, I passed Patricia's old house. The young couple who lived there now had their front porch light on, and I could see them through the window, the dad holding their baby while the mom made dinner. Just a normal family living a normal life, completely unaware of the drama that had once centered on this neighborhood. I got home and stood in my driveway for a moment, looking at my house. The chimney rose against the starlit sky, solid and well-built, approved by every relevant authority. In a few months, I'd use it again, and smoke would rise from it into the cold winter air, and it would be the most normal thing in the world. I thought about Patricia in prison, working through her issues in court-mandated therapy. I thought about her apology letter, still sitting in my drawer. I didn't hate her anymore. Mostly, I felt sad for her. She'd had a good life, a position of authority, a neighborhood that had trusted her, and she destroyed it all because she couldn't stand being told no. Inside, I made tea and settled on my couch, pulling out my laptop to catch up on some work emails. One was from the mayor's office, asking if I'd be interested in serving on a committee to review HOA regulations across Boulder. Apparently, My situation had prompted city council discussions about whether there should be better oversight of HOA boards and stronger protections for homeowners. I replied saying I'd be honored to serve. If my experience could help prevent other homeowners from facing similar harassment, or help identify HOA boards that were overstepping their authority, it would be worth it. That night, I had the best sleep I'd had in months. I dreamed of smoke rising from chimneys all across Colorado, from thousands of homes where families gathered for warmth and comfort, and nobody was afraid. The years that followed were good ones. The HOA committee. I served on helped draft new county guidelines that gave homeowners clearer paths to challenge unreasonable restrictions. Douglas served 3 successful terms as HOA president before stepping down and endorsing Ellen, who ran unopposed and brought her own thoughtful leadership style to the role. The barbecue competition became legendary in our area of Boulder, attracting teams from neighboring developments and even getting written up in the local paper. Carl finally lost his title in year 4 to Margaret's team, and his good-natured devastation was one of the funniest things I'd ever witnessed. Robert, the elderly man with the bird feeders, became something of a neighborhood fixture. He set up multiple feeders and started identifying and cataloging all the bird species that visited. Kids would stop by to learn about birds from him, and he'd light up telling them about the differences between chickadees and nuthatches. I continued my work as fire marshal, handling inspections and investigations and educational programs. The irony of the Patricia situation never quite faded. Other fire marshals across the state would occasionally reference it in professional meetings, always with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "Hey, Stephen, anyone try to burn down your house lately?" became an unfortunate running joke. Patricia was released on parole after serving 6 years. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved to Denver and was working at a nonprofit that helped women transition out of incarceration. She'd apparently completed multiple therapy programs and addiction counseling, even though addiction hadn't been part of her original issues. Seems prison had opened her eyes to a lot of personal demons. She never returned to Meadowbrook Estates. Her ex-husband had long since sold the house and moved on. As far as I know, she never attempted to contact anyone from the neighborhood again, except for that one letter she'd sent me years earlier, on the 10-year anniversary of the incident. As it had come to be known in neighborhood lore, the HOA threw a celebration. It was partly tongue-in-cheek, partly genuine commemoration of how far we'd come. They presented me with a plaque that read, "To Stephen Anderson, who fought for the right to smoke out his chimney and accidentally saved a neighborhood. Thank you for your courage and your unwillingness to back down from what was right." I hung it in my office at the fire station, where it never failed to prompt questions from visitors. The story had become something of a legend in fire service circles, a bizarre cautionary tale about HOA overreach and the importance of knowing your rights. Standing in my backyard that evening, watching the anniversary party wind down, I reflected on everything that had happened. A simple fireplace had been the catalyst for so much change. Patricia's obsessive need for control had revealed itself over something as innocent as chimney smoke, and in trying to maintain her authority, she'd lost everything. But from that destruction had come something better. A neighborhood that actually functioned as a community. People who looked out for each other instead of looking for violations. Leaders who served instead of ruled. It wasn't perfect, but it was real and good and worth fighting for. Carl came over with 2 beers, handing me one. We'd both gotten older, both a bit grayer, but we were still the same guys who'd bonded over Sunday football and fireplace fires. 10 years, he said. Can you believe it? Barely. Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. You know what I tell people when they ask about Meadowbrook? I tell them it's the neighborhood where we learned that standing up to bullies matters, even when the bully has authority, even when it would be easier to just go along. That's a good way to put it. You changed this place, Stephen. You changed a lot of lives by refusing to let one unreasonable person steamroll you. I clinked my beer against his. We changed it, all of us together. I just started the ball rolling. The party continued into the night, and eventually I made my way home. My house was dark and quiet, exactly the way I liked it. I didn't build a fire that night since it was summer, but I looked at my fireplace with deep appreciation for what it represented. It was more than just a heating source. It was a symbol of the right to enjoy your own property, the right to say no to unreasonable demands, the courage to stand up for yourself and others even when it's uncomfortable. And ultimately, it was a reminder that sometimes the smallest things can become catalysts for the biggest changes. I never regretted building that fire on that cold December morning 10 years ago. And I never regretted standing my ground when Patricia Henderson knocked on my door demanding I put it out. Sometimes the right choice isn't the easy choice, but it's still right. Looking back, I'm grateful for all of it. The conflict, the resolution, the community that emerged stronger. Even Patricia's arrest and imprisonment, as tragic as it was, had served a purpose. It had shown clearly and definitively that there are limits to authority and consequences for abusing power. Meadowbrook Estates stood as proof that neighborhoods could overcome their worst moments and become something better. That communities could reform, heal, and grow. That standing up for your rights wasn't just about you. It was about everyone who couldn't or wouldn't stand up for themselves. And it all started with smoke from a chimney, rising into the cold Colorado sky, bothering nobody except one person who couldn't stand not being in control. That smoke had cleared now in every sense, leaving behind clean air and a neighborhood that had learned the most important lesson any community can learn. Freedom matters more than control, and courage matters more than compliance.